Now, the UN Civil Society Conference is going to be taking place in Nairobi. Nairobi is hosting big events.
Yes.
Yeah, recently.
Is there a conference that deals with floods?
UN Climate. It was there just the other day.
They came a bit early.
They came just before the flood, just to create that awareness that this is likely to happen. Did we hear?
We had.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. We did. So now the UN Civil Society Conference is going to take place, and this is ahead of another global conversation that will be taking place. To hear more about this, we are joined by the co-chair of this particular Nairobi conference, Carole Asero-Ageng'o is our guest. Good morning, Carole.
Good morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
How's it preparing for this event?
Sleep is overrated.
I've always said this.
Yeah, we should just
You agree, right?
Yeah, we do away with sleep.
Yeah.
That's all we need to do.
I mean,
Yeah.
who needs to sleep?
Nobody.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Now, to welcome you to the conversation, CT will give you an African proverb. Your job is to listen to the proverb.
Okay.
Job number 1. Job number 2, put it into your brain, kidogo kidogo. Number 3, give us your interpretation of it.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I write it down?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me get it.
Would you like something to write with?
No, I do have a pen.
Okay. Does it work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have several.
Tell us when you're ready. So every week, CT goes to one African country. He does some research on proverbs. Then he brings us one proverb a day from that country. This week, he's in a country on the East African coast.
You may have heard of it. Yes. It is famous for very many things. Some good, some horribly, terribly bad. But the positive thing about it, huge coastline, twins. But it has athletes, world-beating athletes. Serious tourism.
Okay.
Currently, it's flooded all over. Currently, but that's just a passing phase. Yes. You might know the country. But I'll give you a hint. The capital begins with N.
I'm getting it.
Mogadishu.
Yeah, something like that.
Addis Ababa.
Yes. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Carole. I'm very sorry. I'm not the one.
A rat trap catches both the guilty and the innocent.
A rat trap catches both the guilty and the innocent.
The guilty and the innocent.
What's your interpretation of it?
There are two sides to any situation, to any story. Yes. That's how I'd interpret it.
Two sides to every story.
Yeah.
I actually like that interpretation. It's completely existentialist.
Yes.
I may be the guilty one here.
Yeah.
Or maybe the innocent one here.
Okay. You take your pick.
Yeah. Or maybe the lawyer in me would say, innocent until proven guilty.
Told you. But it's a good interpretation.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one, isn't it? Okay. The UN Civil Society Conference is going to be taking place in Nairobi.
Yes.
What is that?
First of all, before I start with the UN Civil Society Conference, just to say how deeply saddened I am and a little, not really a little, very disturbed by the loss of life, the destruction that is being caused by the floods. I think that's something that even as we've been preparing for this conference, we've talked about often, we've stopped and reflected on and seen how we could even bring the issues that underlie the flooding into the conversation. So just to say that we stand in solidarity with our compatriots who are suffering greatly, and whatever we'll be able to do to support, we will. Having said that, the Civil Society Conference is happening on Thursday and Friday. but on Wednesday we'll have a pre-conference. So I'll speak a little bit about that later. But what it is that it is a step towards the Summit of the Future. The Summit of the Future will be in New York, so I'll take the Showmax thing with me in September. And the Summit of the Future is the world looking at how to reinvigorate the Sustainable Development Goals. If you will recall, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in 2015 with a due date of 2030. We are far, far away from reaching the goals. And how do we then move forward with this? And so the Secretary General came up with a policy paper, if I may call it that in simple language, called our common agenda. And in our common agenda, he puts forth the idea of networked, effective multilateralism. And with the reason for that is so that we can turbocharge the SDGs, because the aspirations in the SDGs remain very valid. And so how do we not come to 2030 and say, hey, we've not reached them? So it's turbocharging towards the SDGs. And with that, then a pact for the future is being negotiated that has 5 main chapters. One is on sustainable development and financing for development. The second is on international peace and security. The third is science and technology and digital evolution. The fourth is youth and future generations, and the fifth is transformative governance. So those big 5 chapters, if you look through them, they cover a lot of what is in the SDGs, but now reflecting how we can take this forward and still get to the place where we have a world that looks at people, prosperity, and the planet, all the issues that we're facing, for example, in Nairobi now, in Kenya now. So that is what the summit is doing. And the Nairobi conference this week is a step towards that summit. Yes.
Why the civil society?
Civil society is a critical component of the world. Governments form the UN and they negotiate on behalf of the people, on behalf of you and I, when they go to wherever they meet. So civil society, right from when the UN was created, was considered a critical component in this, a critical cog in this wheel of development, in this wheel of bringing about the peace that was sought. Because if you look at the creations of the UN, it came on the back of a devastating war. And so as the world was looking to course correct, then the place of civil society was established way back in 1947. And civil society has engaged, even in Kenya, we engage on a regular basis. We picket, we love to picket, but we also engage governments to bring about the development that we all aspire for. And so having established the critical role that civil society plays, the first conference was held in 1947, 48, and there have been 68 conferences since. So this is the 69th, and it's happening for the first time in the Global South. Kenya is hosting on this first trip to the Global South. So it's a big moment for Kenya, for Kenyan civil society, but for civil society around the world. It's a global conference and we'll be addressing the Pact for the Future, the 5 chapters that I mentioned, and we want to come out with an outcome that will take us towards the development that we aspire for. Yeah.
Is there some kind of traceability? Because you talked about 68, this is the 69th. So if you look at the previous 68 conferences that have taken place around the world, can we trace and say what milestones have been reached, achieved as a result of all of this coming together and the impact that it has on governments? Can we see that there is a trajectory towards achieving?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is, and I think I'll speak about three main peaks. The first one was in 1972 in Stockholm, I believe, and then 92 in Rio, and then with the when else? 2015, when the SDGs were being negotiated, and around these conferences, civil society formations, if I may call it that, were created that would then actively support governments. For example, the civil society around the issues of climate change and the environment. The major groups and other stakeholders were formed in 2015 to support the SDG process. And what these civil society organizations have done is across the years worked alongside government, at times besides government, at times with government, to bring about some of the issues that would then be reflected in the negotiations that governments take. So this year we have the high-level political forum, which happens every year. And this year's high-level political forum, the focus of the countries that are reporting the voluntary national reviews is also reflecting the discussions that are going on towards the summit and in the Pact for the Future. And so civil society brings that to bear. It brings the voice of the people to these discussions. It brings data. It complements governments, holds governments accountable. And that has been consistent, and that is not going to change. Yeah.
The voice of the people and how it bears in terms of responsibility and holding governments accountable for what they do seems to be a voice that seems to ebb and flow over time. That the voice of the people sometimes is frustrated, and these are the real things that we look at, because there's the high level summits and conferences. Carole, you understand that? And most times the voice of the people, in as much as it is represented, is not present. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
The voice of the people in any country at any time is very different from one country to the next. How can we say that we would have a proper representation of what truly the voice of the people is when a very few select then are there? And is it encompassing in terms of what really is discussed? That is, what is being discussed at a summit representative of what the person who is, look, we have an example right now with Kenya. Is it representative of the person today then who is hoping that her government or his government will do 1, 2, 3 in terms of notches on the development scale?
I'll answer your question in two ways. Let me start from the summit perspective, the conference perspective. What is happening in Nairobi this week? It's a global conference, and UNON, the UN, UNEP as we know it, can only take in 1,700 people from around the globe. That is not even a drop in the ocean. That's a quarter of a drop in the ocean. Because it didn't even cover the Kenyan civil society organizations. It's happening in Kenya. So can we say that Kenyan civil society will be represented at that conference? If we were to look at it in simple terms, we would say no. But what then do we do to ensure that their voice is represented? And we have to also think representation. Does it mean being present or having your issues present? We can't all be present. Sure. Even for the 1,700, it's been a very tough call, seeing who to bring, and the interest has been great. So for this conference, one of the things we've done is we've had 2 civil society activations, and we're having one on Wednesday, which we're calling the Local Mobilization Day. So on Friday last week, we met with the civil society representatives, about 50 of them, who are mainly the heads of institutions. And then on Tuesday, last week, we met with 100 CSOs drawn from around the country. And on Wednesday, we're going to meet with 300. Now, what that does, it still doesn't represent how many CSOs are there? Almost 14,000? It doesn't represent, 300 doesn't represent if we're to look at it in absolute terms. But what are the issues that are of relevance to Kenyans? Because then we could say, let's talk about the Pact for the Future, the 5 chapters. Those are relevant to Kenyans.
Sure.
But that's big English, if you put it that way, because then there are certain things that we must break down so that they respond to our issues as Kenyans. And that's a conversation we'll have on Wednesday. And we have mobilized in a way that we will represent the 47 counties. And we will try and represent the diversity of issues on issues that affect Kenyans as a people.
Carole.
So that way then we will have handled that representation. And we've encouraged different organizations in their countries to also mobilize where they are, so that the people who are coming to Nairobi and ultimately those who will go to New York carry the voice of the people that they represent and from the spaces they come from. The second way that I'll respond to the question is how we then curated the conference. So my co-chair and I, my co-chair is called Nudara Yusuf, and she's from India, but works in DC. And I'm saying this because then we were looking at issues of diversity, because we need to represent, we need to touch on the broad diversity that is represented. I represent an older constituency. I work for Helpage International. She represents a younger constituency. So we tried to bring that from the word go. The people who brought us in tried to bring that from the word go. And then we came in and came up with 3 objectives. One is that the conference would be inclusive. And we have tried the best we can to make sure that the issues are anchored on the 5 chapters of the Pact for the Future, the representation from across the globe, and also representation across the various diversities, age, disability, indigenous people, we've represented that in the participation, but also in the substance of the discussions that we will have at the conference. The second way that we have tried to address the diversity versus the space available is to look at what do we want from the conference. And we've said we want impact coalitions that will reflect the multilateralism that is reflected in our common agenda that I spoke about earlier on. And out of this, we want to create impact coalitions that will be made of governments, UN agencies, civil society, academia, think tanks, the broad range of actors that are in society to address the key issues that will come out of the Pact for the Future and the related Global Digital Compact and Declaration on Future Generations. Because it's only when we have that multi-stakeholder collaboration in a networked way that is effective will we attain some of the goals that we seek to attain. And then our third goal, or our third objective, was around innovation. We're living in a world that is highly digital, highly evolving very fast. But we're also living in a world where we have generations that range from the very young to the very old. So we'd like to bring in the intergenerational solidarity in that space, and that we capture the diversity across the ages and across the various issues that are reflected in the technological space. So we believe that when we do that, not everybody will be in Nairobi, but when they look at what came out of Nairobi, they can identify and say, I wasn't there, but my issue was addressed.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. 29 minutes to 9. We're having a conversation ahead of the UN Civil Society Conference that's going to be taking place in Nairobi. The first time it's taking place in the Global South, and Nairobi is hosting it. later this week. What days? Thursday and Friday?
Thursday and Friday.
Yep.
Yes.
And Wednesday there'll be a civil society local mobilization day where over 300 civil society organizations will be meeting in Nairobi to discuss, the local issues that need to get into this conference. Carole Asero-Ageng'o is the co-chair of this particular conference, the 69th UN Civil Society Conference. The conversation continues shortly. Good morning. So, Carole, you've said, just to answer what Ndu was asking, how do we make sure that all our voices as the people, citizens of the world, are heard in these conferences? And he said, well, the structure of this is such that issues come to the table, even if not all people come to the table. So you work then backwards to make sure that then you're able to collect those issues from all communities. And the civil society is the best place to do this, because civil society is represented from the very smallest units in a community, the community-based organizations, rising all the way to national civil society organizations and international civil society organizations, which then comes into what the event of last Tuesday and the event of this Wednesday are representing. For me, I'm sorry, Carole, but it just sounded like, it's a box-ticking exercise. When you say you bring in 300 people into a room in one day and you bring up issues. Last week you brought how many people into a room?
100.
100 people came into a room last week. 7 to 11 days ahead of the conference. And then 2 days, one day before the conference, you bring in another 300 people into a room and you say that now those ones we are then taking the issues to the table. Isn't it late in the day?
No.
Should this have happened like continuously in the year running up to this, to make sure that this community-based organizations into civil society organizations are actually collecting issues specifically to be brought to the UN Civil Society Conference, so that then yesterday and tomorrow and Wednesday rather, what you're only doing is actually all of you agreeing that these are the main issues, these are the priority issues, and these then can come in later?
Yes and no. So a lot of it has been happening already, and some of it will happen now, and some will happen after the conference. But you will recall that Nudara and I were appointed into this role in February. That didn't give us too much wiggle room in terms of mobilizing in the way that you suggest. That is not to say that mobilization is not important. And the organizations that came together have been mobilizing. It's only the coming together that happened last week. When we come together on Wednesday, we're not taking a box. We are addressing, we're putting on the table, and this is based on consultations with various organizations. We're putting on the table certain issues, and we're not going to come to a neat conclusion on Wednesday. The conversation will continue. Some of the conversations will start on Wednesday and will continue towards the summit. Remember, Nairobi is a moment. It's not the end in itself.
Right.
The conference, when we close on Friday evening, we won't have achieved a goal and said, let's go home, it's now done. We'll be looking towards the summit of the future. So how do we get Kenyan civil society engaged in the summit? Because that's a bigger goal. Engaging in Nairobi is a very critical step towards the summit.
Okay.
So out of the 300, we would like that when we finish the day on Wednesday, the 300 will say, hey, these out of the 5 chapters of the Pact for the Future, we want to run with chapter 1. So between now and September, these are the ways we're going to also mobilize. Remember, they come with a constituency behind them. So they're not coming there as individuals. So they're coming with a constituency behind them. So they're going to continue the conversation when they go back. If you look at the way we have framed the conference, the impact coalitions that I spoke about, we have a window between now and 16th of May for applications for impact coalitions that would like to be formed after the conference.
Right.
So we're using Nairobi Moment as a place to bring these issues to
like
the
a launch
table.
pad.
A launch pad of
Right.
sorts.
So then let me ask the question.
Yes.
Going back again to what Ndu was asking, how does an ordinary community somewhere, pick any part of Kenya, feel involved in this if right now, as the civil society organizations are preparing to meet on Wednesday, if this community is not aware that there's a meeting happening on Wednesday and there's a conference happening on Friday and there's another summit happening in September, if the small community in a rural village or even in an urban neighborhood somewhere is not aware of this, how is it represented? Or are they aware?
There is some level of awareness. I don't have the empirical statistics to show the level of awareness. But the organizations that we have mobilized, like I said, they come with constituencies behind them. And not everybody will speak and say, I know about the summit, the word summit of the future, the 4 words.
Yeah.
But we'd like that they speak to the ideas. So if they know that there's a discussion happening to revamp or to turbocharge the SDGs, that is sufficient. They don't have to say, I know the summit of the future. They need to know.
But they need
idea.
to know that there's a meeting that's taking place.
Yes, they need to know.
And
But
it's a pivotal meeting.
Yes, what I'm saying is they don't need to speak the technical language. They need to be able to speak to the issues, but know that there's a process that will take the issues that they speak about and have it reflected in this technical space that they may not be in. And that has been ongoing. We've also had, for example, the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, which is part of this process. It was held in Addis about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
In the lead up to that conference, civil society organizations mobilized their constituencies, and those that were then able to go to Addis, because not everybody could, came with the weight of the constituencies that they represent.
How do they come with the weight of a constituency they represent if they have not gone to the constituency to say, ahead of a meeting, we are going to have a meeting in September, and there are 5 broad areas that this meeting will be focusing on. We think that these areas touch on us as a community, and the community then agrees and says that these are our areas and these are our issues, and this is how we can start addressing those issues. So when the meeting takes place, if it takes place, the people are at least aware that these are issues are being discussed this year somewhere at a UN conference.
Yes, and there's been a lot of awareness that has taken place. Remember, I spoke about the major groups and other stakeholders. These are 21 groups from around the world. So there are major groups on children and youth, there are major groups on science and technology, labor, women, name it. So these groups have been doing their awareness from the time that the summit was announced almost a year ago. So it's not like this is just chancing upon civil society. There's been a lot of awareness that has
In a build-up to this.
in the build-up to this.
Before Ndu you come in, I just want to ask, you and your co-chair were appointed to this role to prepare for this conference in February.
Yes.
Conference in May. Did we know that the conference was going to take place this year?
That would be a question for the UN.
Who appointed you to the role?
Were appointed by a mechanism that was put together by the Department of Global Communications of the UN. I'm saying that, but I also want to say that, yes, there are certain issues which the UN could speak to. But when we were appointed to the role, we knew the conference would take place. The announcement of the conference took a while to come to the fore. But when we were...
Just pause a moment. When you say announcement of the conference, is it the destination? Or is it just the event itself?
No, the existence, the date and destination
was known.
No, it was only announced when, I think, January. Yeah. So the idea of the conference was known. There are a lot of other issues that, like I said, I don't speak for the UN. They would speak to those issues, why that announcement came late, and there is good justification for it. And a lot of it also has to do with the funding of the conference, because for such a conference to take place, you need money. And so there was a lot of other issues that then...
So there are very many questions leading up to January, leading up to your appointment in February, and the short window of time that you've had then to put together this conference to take place in May.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we can... I try to sometimes ground things, and then so I try to imagine what's being said, because one of the things you talked about is influencing, persuading governments to actually do what they're supposed to do, for lack of better or more complicated explanation. So yesterday, I looked at a road that is not a year old. It's not even a year old, and it was just constructed.
Yeah.
It's now it's a mess.
Yeah.
And I started to think to myself, when will we ever get to the place as communities, as individuals, and then, sprouting to the bigger group, families, communities, societies, governments, nation states, etc. In this global south that we still like to deem it as, when we get to the point whereby development and the maintenance, sustainable development that we talk about, is actually front and center in terms of a priority. And then I thought to myself, even as you were saying this just now, I said, is such impressed upon that will it take these conferences, will it take the coming together of 1,700 people in Nairobi or in Stockholm or wherever, to impress upon us our minds, that we can actually do things right, timely, for the benefit of people, for the benefit of sustainable development? That will it take that for this thing to happen? Whereby there's a road that it needs to be done properly from the get-go, whereby that there's water, it's available for everybody, that women, children are taken care of, that men and women who go to work then can be protected. I mean, can we see that there was a correlation between having those conversations and actually seeing sustainable goals achieved?
That's a very loaded question. If you look at what is it that drives us as a people, and by us as a people, I don't mean just the Kenyans. As human beings, what is it that will drive me to aspire for more? And what is it that will drive me to ensure that what has been committed is actually delivered?
Right.
Because it has to be on both sides of the divide. As a people, and I'll speak from the Kenyan perspective, what will mobilize us to the point where we say we want public systems that work?
Yes.
I grew up in a public system, went to public schools, and went to public health centers. The health centers where all you needed was a clean bottle, then they'd put a syrup for you. You didn't need money, you didn't need insurance.
Wow.
You went to hospital when you're sick, get your cough syrup and go. I look back at those with nostalgia. I remember when the Kamweros would run around the estates picking garbage. What went wrong, that something changed, that can no longer happen. I think it has to also do with our value systems, where the public good gave way to private greed. So how do we get back to the point where we're pushing for public good? Because that is when a road that needs to be fixed will be fixed. So long as we look at it from the private perspective, so long as I can take my children to school, when I fall sick I can go to hospital, so long as I privatize the idea of development, we will not get to and privatize not from the public-private sector space, privatize from my own individual perspective, because then I will not see the need to make any move, irrespective of how many conferences we hold. But if I value the accountability, if I value the public good, if I value systems that work, then it will affect me as an individual. Now, let's extrapolate that to the rest of the society. If each one of us came to the table with that mindset, then we will create the mass that we need to create the change that we also need. The conferences are not a panacea for the problems that bedevil the world. No, they're not. But they are a critical space where these issues can be addressed. And if you go, I'll go back to our aspiration of impact coalitions, because we will not, and I keep saying this, we will not give up the right to picket. Picketing is fun if you've ever picketed. But there is a space for collaborating with government for that public good, because picketing for picketing's sake is also a waste of time. So how do we get government, UN agencies, civil society, academia, think tanks, all these people together to address issues? Why does academia come in? They do a lot of research. Does civil society draw from the research and the data to inform its initiatives? Maybe, maybe not. So how do we get that working together around certain issues? We've come up with 20 coalitions, impact coalitions, based on the applications we received for the conference. This could mutate into 50 coalitions, or they could narrow down into 15. That is fine. But the key issue is that all these actors must come together for us to be able to deliver the services that we're talking about. That person in the village, in my village right now, where I come from, a place called Obambo, you may not find it on the map. Right now it's raining.
It's on the map.
It's on the map. You know it. Excellent.
I know exactly where it is.
Excellent. If right now I have a big Prado or whatever, I can't drive to my mother's house and park in front of her door for her to
Be proud of her daughter.
because there is no road. If a woman in my village goes into labor today and her child is in breech position, she will die. Not because there's no hospital, because there's no road. So the reason for also looking at intersectionality, multi-stakeholder engagement is that the health NGOs, for example, in my village, must speak to the infrastructural NGOs. Because otherwise, the women will keep dying. If it rains, that's it.
Isn't that the frustration, though, Carole?
Yeah.
That, at a certain level, there is talk, which is also the same level that's expected to drive action.
Yeah.
But sometimes the talk and the action are in same WhatsApp application, but in different groups.
Yes.
If you look at just the kind of conferences and the importance of the conferences on paper, look at SDGs, for example. SDGs were saying, they were from the Millennium Development Goals, and what was said, these are the global issues, and if governments and civil society and other stakeholders work together, we can achieve these goals. We didn't achieve them. We said, let's call them SDGs. We have until 2030. How far are we in achieving them? Still, it's conversations upon conversations upon conversations, and yet, it appears like it's one of those things that we have very good, on paper to look at and say, we are looking at SDG number 6 on issues of sanitation. How many people have access to sanitation? How many people don't have access to sanitation? How much are we doing to ensure sanitation? What are we doing to ensure global, there's no hunger globally? How much movement are we making towards this? So my question is, the relevance of these global organizations and global conversations, like the UN, if you just look at these 5 items, financing for development, international peace and security, is the UN still relevant and capable of actually addressing the world needs?
The UN certainly needs to reform in various areas. But I want to pivot away from that conversation a little bit and give you an example. And this is from where I work, my 9 to 5 job, not the night duties that I've been doing lately. We work on older people's rights, well-being, and dignity. And you've heard of that Inua Jamii,
Yep.
Pesa Wazee, as we call it.
Yep.
Pesa Wazee is being rolled out by government. And government has the infrastructure. The monolith of government is able, it has the infrastructure. Now, we are an NGO. In the face of government, we're a little NGO. But we need each other to be able to effectively deliver, because at the end of the day, we want the older person to live with dignity and well-being. The government on the other side wants to make sure that there's social protection through this initiative of Inua Jamii. So what do? We come together with the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection, and we collaborate through the government infrastructure and through our technical initiatives, our technical input in the initiatives we do. Then we mobilize communities, we create awareness for them, we do all the things we do. Government comes with its structure through the constituency, devolved government, and they're able to release the Pesa Jamii, Pesa Wazee. Even if we received 300 trillion Kenya shillings, we would not be able to do that as CSO, because when we need to know who in Obambo is an old person who needs that money, we need the chief, because we don't have that infrastructure. So that partnership is critical. And if you look at the way the Inua Jamii processes are now moving on, the money is going out almost on a timely basis. It's not 100%. No, it's not 100%.
It's not.
But it has improved significantly. There's a major improvement. But that has
From
only...
what to what?
Huh?
From no money to some money twice a year.
No, now it's not twice a year. It was twice a year, I think, the year before.
Carole, there's a problem here.
Yes.
Why do we keep finding it acceptable that it doesn't work like it should, and yet the money is there? I am troubled.
No, we don't find it acceptable at all, City. We don't. And that is why then we come in. Because we could stand and picket outside NSSF. We could, and it's a good thing to do, and say, release Pesa Wazee, we could find songs to do. But will that release the money?
No. Actually, you see, it's just that we don't have the time, and perhaps you should come back again. The civil society has a good rap. The effectiveness and the continuity of it is always in question in my mind. Lots of activities, lots of sounds. Now, this one, UN conference, this one is big sound. Big bass.
Yeah, it's big sound with big impact.
Kabisa. The impact is what I'm questioning after the conference.
And to come back here. Please invite me back.
We'll invite you.
Yes, because
When?
then
Before September? Or
No, you can. I can come on Monday.
Okay.
That will be too early. I can come in June, whenever. But we have our impact coalitions are going to create the change that we need.
No, we want the before and after, because the after, then you'll have an open playing field to just discuss what you like and tell us what you've done.
No.
We want to hear the plans, what you're hoping to do, what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah.
And we'll also ask you what you've achieved before. There are too many civil society groups or individuals who call themselves they belong to these things. One doesn't quite feel the impact. It's the noise we hear and the sound and the names.
The impact is there. The impact is there. But for the conference, let's go back to the conference.
Yes.
I said we have 3 objectives, and I want you to hold me accountable to this. Inclusivity. Yes.
Impact coalitions. Innovation.
Exactly. Now, the impact coalitions is where I want us to focus, because the impact coalitions is where we will drive the change that we're talking about.
Okay.
And
so we'll start with the formation of the coalitions.
Yes.
And then the impact we'll see how the impact comes later.
Yes. The
so
coalitions
we'll invite you
have
again.
already, the coalitions are already being formed.
We'll
Yes.
invite you again before
Yes.
the Summit of the Future to look at the impact that these coalitions are having, driving towards the Summit of the Future, and then what we expect to come out of the Summit of the Future as a build-up from Nairobi.
Yes.
Thank you for
in
joining
the,
us
Yeah,
today.
in the meantime, I'll also give you some information on what we do, because I think there is a lack of information on what civil society does.
A lot. You talk a lot. No, you do a lot. We know.
Thank you.
Carole Asero-Ageng'o is the co-chair of the UN Civil Society Conference that's going to be taking place in Nairobi for the first time in 69 meetings. It's taking place in Nairobi this weekend. No, end of this week, Thursday and Friday.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.